engage in intensive introspection to prepare ourselves really for the High Holy Days. And there are a number of customs that are observed during the month of Elul that help us to do that. First of all, let's begin with recognizing that the rabbis thought that even the name Elul was an acronym from the Song of Songs, Ani l'dodi v'dodi li. I am my beloved and my beloved is mine. It speaks to a relationship between people and God that is essentially a love relationship. We engage in opportunities to observe mitzvot, not out of fear that God will punish us, but more out of a love for God and a desire to want to please God. One of the customs having to do with Elul is the sounding of the shofar after the shacharit service, after the morning service. It's a tradition to sound the shofar. No blessing is recited, but the sound of the shofar wakes us up. We arouse ourselves out of the lethargy, the emotional, spiritual lethargy we may be experiencing because we're tired, because we're running from one thing to the next. Elul is about a time of slowing it down a little bit, looking inside, deciding about the kind of person we want to be, how we want to relate to the world and to our loved ones. It's an opportunity, really, to set aside all the noise and the activities that may distract us from the things that ultimately matter. And that shofar and the recitation of Psalms. My mother, Aleh Shalom, my mother knew the entire book of Psalms by heart. And during the month of Elul, she would recite them under her breath. And I remember watching her cook or clean or whatever she was doing. She was reciting these holy words with such reverence and love that I thought any words that could bring that much peace to a woman in our little corner of the world of Brooklyn must be very powerful words indeed. So I learned to love the words as I loved the one who was saying them. And that relationship, because it all comes down to relationships. Who are we estranged from and why? Is it worth the pain of going perhaps months or years without contact with people we love because of pride or for some other really silly reason? The month of Elul puts things in perspective for us, allows us to have the time and the inclination to repair relationships that we thought could never be repaired. And I've seen it happen. I've seen people who maybe squelch their pride for a minute and say to somebody, you know something, I miss you, and I've done something wrong and I know I've hurt you. Let me be forgiven. Let me have you back in my life. And people I've discovered are really usually very willing to allow somebody back into their lives. It takes a certain amount of courage, but then again, the month of Elul is devoted to being strong and strengthening each other and doing it in a very gentle way, in a way that perhaps we don't think. Strength we usually associate with aggression, but this is a strength that comes from within. And they even remind us, the rabbis, that when the windows were built in the first and second temple, they were built in the opposite direction that windows are usually constructed. Usually they're wider on the outside and narrow on the inside to bring light in. But the windows of the temple were built in the opposite direction because they thought the light was coming out of the temple out into the world. And that's a metaphor that could be helpful to us as we prepare ourselves for the internal covenant. You know, the light that comes out of us. It's a time to clean things up and allow ourselves to start anew. How wonderful it would be, wouldn't it, to be able to start fresh, to say the mistakes that I've made were attempts to learn. And that's the word for chait that's very often recited during the month of Elul. The word chait, which is usually translated as sin, literally means an arrow. An arrow you shot at a target and missed. But missing the target can tell you a great deal about where the target is. You know, if you're shooting wide to the right, you may want to move the bow to the left. You know, people continually shoot to the right and won't move their bow. The rabbis are sort of sympathetic to them. It's not that they condemn them, they just say it's silly. Move the bow. These are all learning experiences, and all of life is learning, and that's why the month of Elul has to be seen as a process. And I think sometimes we may think of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. I atone, I'm in, I'm out, I atoned, I'm done. But the atonement process is exactly that. It's a process, and we have to get ourselves ready for it. You take it in little steps. You don't do it all at once. And the rabbis also remind us that it's not the Day of Atonement, unless you've just committed one sin. It's usually the Day of Atonements. And that phrase, Yom Kippurim, if you put different vowels under those consonants, same consonants, you get Yom Kippurim, either the day like Purim or the Day of Atonement. On Purim, we know we put on masks and we pretend to be somebody else. And it could be that kind of day, Yom Kippurim, or it could be Yom Kippurim, the day when we take off our masks, when we reveal ourselves as we truly are, for all of our mistakes and all of our nobility, and recognize that we are loved. Not because we're perfect, but because we're trying to get better. We're trying to heal, and we're trying to heal the world. That can be so invigorating because it's not incumbent upon us to do it all in one day. It just seems totally overwhelming. But if we practice maybe each day, trying to make each day a little more loving, a little more meaningful, maybe adding a little light to the world, that's the way the world changes, and that's the way that we change. So we have this wonderful gift given to us this month, and I pray that we enjoy it with shalom and peace. I don't know if that made